Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thought we were having this break, but it is already time to begin, and it is now 3:33 p.m. Let us begin the session. In the first roundtable session, we discussed culture. The HK+ National Strategy Research Project Agency and the Digital Times have prepared this Culture and Strategies Forum for the Korean Peninsula and the North. Due to the pandemic, the scale of the program has been reduced, but the substance of the discussions that we had in the first roundtable was very significant. So in roundtable 1, we discussed the power of soft power, which is culture, but soft power can also lead to the development of the hard power as well. Now, in the second roundtable, we are going to discuss this hard power, which is trade. When you examine the diplomatic policies of the current administration, they were mainly about the new Northern policy and the new Southern policy. In line with the new Northern policy, we are holding this forum. But there have been some mentioning or comments in the previous session that there was lack of research on this important topic. So I believe that such research on the topic will continue on, and the forum can be a facilitator in doing so. Now we have this global expansion that has been slowed down by the pandemic, and some even call this the globalization, as the globalization has been slowing down. And this means that we have to reflect on the changes that are happening these days. In this roundtable session 2, we have 9 researchers or scholars as well as representatives from the public sector. Let me introduce myself briefly. I am a professor at the Division of Media Communication at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. I am also the chief of the Public Brand Research Center. My name is Youkyung. Nice to meet you. I served as a member of the Presidential Council on National Branding, and I also am a member of the National Commission of Korea for UNESCO. So I've been involved in the discussions of cultural and educational exchanges. And that may be why Professor Kang Joon-yong invited me to serve as a chairperson of the second round table. Let me now introduce the keynote speaker and then the panel members. The keynote presentation will be provided by someone who just came back to Korea from China, Mr. Han-jin Park. He is Director General of the KOTRA Global Academy, and he was former Regional Director General for China, and he received a PhD from Popdan University. So he's an expert on trade and economy. Let me now introduce the panel members. But before that, let's give a big hand to the keynote speaker. Next, let me introduce the panel members. You may refer to the proceeding, and the panel members are introduced in the alphabetical order. So let me follow this order as well. First of all, we have Kim Sang-woo, Director of the Global Business Department at the Korea SMEs and Startups Agency. Thank you. Next, we have Chairman Kim Yoon-sik of Shindong Enercom, Inc. And Director Joung Ho Park from the New Northern Policy Development Department at the Korean Institute for International Economic Policy. Next, we have Ambassador Park Joon-yong at the head office. He will soon be dispatched to Saudi Arabia as Korean ambassador. He is going to Saudi Arabia. It may not be an easy job to take, but congratulations. Next, we have lawyer Park Hyo Min from Yulchon law firm. Next, we have Professor Lee Sang-jun of the Department of Eurasian Studies at Kookmin University. Next, we have another lawyer, Jun from Yulchon LLC and chairman of the Korea-Russian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He's also leading the legal advisor team in Russia. Finally, we have Director Chun Eun-gil of the North Trade and Coordination Division at the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy. Thank you very much. The keynote presentation will be for 15 to 20 minutes. I'd like to invite Mr. Park to be up on the podium for the keynote presentation, and the panel members will stay in their seats, and I will each give 6 to 7 minutes for their panel discussion. So first of all, I'd like to invite Director General Park Han-jin from KOTRA for his keynote presentation.
I was working in China and I returned back in Korea after 5 years at the end of January. I majored in Chinese studies, and the 3 provinces of China, specifically in the Northeast Asian region, are incorporated into the northern regions where we are discussing right now. So I have been engaging in exchanges with the government regarding the Northeast Asian provinces in China as part of the northern region. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this forum. I have to say I'm not an expert in this particular field, but I would like to tell you a little bit about what we think is important at KOTRA. And I know that there are many illustrious experts here who have come as panelists. I would like to learn from you. KOTRA provides support to companies who are trading overseas. So your information and your insight can be very helpful for us when we assist these companies. Honorable Kang Joon-yong, HK+ National Strategies Research Project Agency Head, distinguished guests, it is a pleasure to meet you. It is a great pleasure for me to participate in this Culture and Strategies Forum for the Korean Peninsula and the North. We will be discussing peace and mutual prosperity between Korean Peninsula and the Northern region. Congratulations. I hope to see you more success in the second and third forum to come. This is an honor for me to be here today. Currently, the world is facing conflict, dispute, uncertainty among major powers, and the unprecedented crisis that is the COVID-19 pandemic. This is leading to drastic changes in the international order in the framework of cooperation. And these new changes come at us so quickly, even before the old past has been completely disappeared. We're seeing these overlaps between the old and the new. It's important for us to try to protect what we have now, but it's also important to identify new areas with future potential. This new northern region is an area where we've seen a lot of interest early on in Korea, but over time, our interest has lagged behind, which is why I think that today's forum is very important for us, because it can be a catalyst in trying to identify new measures for cooperation with the northern region. These different measures of cooperation, we can discuss them in our discussion, but we should also try to figure out whether they can be put to use in a feasible sense in the field. And in that regard, I would like to tell you some of my thoughts. In the first round, you talked about culture. In the second roundtable, we're here to talk about trade. In my short presentation, I want to focus not on principles and theories, but really on specific and concrete areas where we can engage in cooperation in the field, specifically ways that we can help and assist corporations. And I don't want to continue to repeat myself, and I don't want to talk about redundant areas. The northern region, when it comes to cooperation with Korea, it has a lot of conditions that can allow for mutual prosperity. The northern region has seen some interest, an increased interest since the mid-2010s. Last year, we've seen the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, and this has brought a huge shock to the whole world, including the northern region. They were not exempt from this crisis. But if we take a look at the recent observations, we've been able to see that this pandemic has allowed for new trends and new policy impacts in the northern region. So, for example, in the case of Russia, we can take a look at three different aspects. The first of which is that the economic countermeasures that Russia has announced post-COVID-19 are very significant. Russia has said that it's going to focus on high value-added manufacturing sectors, and these sectors are seeing resilient recovery. In the past, Russia has been focusing more on pharmaceuticals and medical devices manufacturing, but this has given way to e-health, telehealth, and we've seen a very heightened momentum in Russia for high value-added manufacturing. And also, when we look at the Eurasia group as a whole, the regional value chain in this region is seeing revitalization. This is because the value chain of the world that has been largely led by the United States has become a little bit weakened. And so we're seeing a rise of a new regional value chain in the Northeast Asian and Southeast Asian region. And we're seeing something similar like that in the EAEU region. And in fact, in these Eurasian Economic Union, we're seeing the nearshoring phenomenon. This global supply chain and value chain fragmentation is something that we've been seeing after the COVID-19 pandemic. So in the past, we've had not seen a lot of Korean companies make inroads into the northern region, but with the rise of such fragmentation of the supply chain, many Korean companies should look to the northern region, especially with new industries and the digital economy, because these sectors are seeing accelerated growth in the northern region, such as telehealth or working from home or edutech. These areas are being very much highlighted, and e-commerce-based online businesses are becoming more revitalized. Even with our relationship with northern countries, digital trade norms are being seen as important, an important standard that has to be established. And secondly, because we might have another pandemic in the future, we have to establish a healthcare environment that could prepare against future pandemics. So, for example, with telehealth or vaccines and therapeutics, these sectors are seeing a lot of development and growth, particularly in Russia. And with smart home solutions, we're seeing a lot of different opportunities in this sector as well. In KOTRA, we have trade officers for Russia, trade officers for CIS countries, and they provide us with information. And they've said that 3D printing, home cooking, mini automatic storage systems, water purifier systems, they have identified these areas with huge market potential. And in these areas, Korean companies will not be going in blindly, but they will be working together with local companies in the field. Korean companies can export products or engage in investments in the local economy for joint production, JVs. And many companies can also try to do this in the name of social investment, which is something that is highly regarded these days. So this is an area where we can foster more cooperation in. And as I mentioned briefly before, the third aspect that I want to mention is this establishment of a digital economy. This is going to be an area that will see a lot of interest in the future. So we're going to continue to maintain cooperation in the traditional economies, but we want to expand our cooperation in new economies, which it also includes the digital economy. The digital economy can provide new opportunities to Korean companies in the northern region. We often overlook the fact that there is so much potential in this region. In Russia's Skobash, it is included as one of the top 10 smart solution cities. So it is very cutting edge, which means there's a lot of market opportunity. The top 10 smart solution cities include Seoul, Hong Kong, New York, Singapore, these major metropolitan hubs. And Russia also has cities in this, such as Moscow. In China, I've also taken a look at these potential market opportunities in the 3 northeastern provinces in China, such as smart farming. There is a high demand, very increased demand for smart farms. So in certain islands in China, many Korean companies have worked together with the local governments. And I've actually been working in that field to try to liaison between Korean companies and the local governments. Smart farms is an area where Korean companies can have the upper hand, but it's just that we have not made a lot of inroads into the sector. So this is an area that we can think of. The CIS region is not as large in terms of its geography compared to Russia, but we're seeing the rapid rise of what we call the new normal consumption trends. So there's some ample opportunities to be identified in the CIS region. I've read the reports of our trade officers, and in the CIS region, there's corporate messengers, upfront wage services, digital banking. Many of these new types of business opportunities are accelerating there, along with telehealth and telework and other of these areas where Korea's technology and Korea's expertise can play a role in. Going forward, for us to engage in good cooperation with Russia and the CIS countries, we have to focus on certain points in particular. The first of which is that we're going to see the 30th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties with Russia, as well as China. And this could be a very important milestone for us to commemorate and also advance our economic partnership. When we do that, we can make use of this commemorative anniversary to focus on manufacturing, digital, regional value chain, come up with the regional cooperative measures in Russia and in the CIS countries. And that could be a new sort of a motto for new collaboration. Maybe we can host different celebrations and forums and different events. And this is something that companies can sponsor. In the case of Russia, it is a central country in the Eurasian region that is connected to Korea, North Korea, China, and Europe. It has rich natural resources, and it has resources in science, IT, aerospace sectors. And it is also working very hard to move away from resource economy, so try to move toward a post-resource economy, and that is something that we have to be mindful of. In the post-COVID-19 era, Korea has done quite a good job in disease control efforts. And this can be included in the so-called K package to offer economic cooperation to try to engage in joint projects or attracting investment. And maybe we can think about organizing different forums, seminars, trade fairs, and etc. Last year, when the pandemic first occurred, I was in China at the time, and we created a case studio in Beijing where Korean companies could participate in online fairs and have business meetings with their counterparts in China virtually. Now, that was first incorporated in Beijing, but now we have similar virtual formats in major cities across China. There's a pretty large studio in the headquarters in KOTRA, but then there's smaller ones in these hub cities across the world. So it's a very small studio, but it can be used for investment seminars, IR forums, and different business fairs and business meetings. So we can make use of these studios to provide assistance to Korean companies and local companies. Different embassies and consulates overseas are also making use of this studio. The northern region countries are very active in trying to foster the manufacturing sectors and also to try to integrate the regional value chain. This is another area where Korea can identify areas for cooperation. In this process, KOTRA can offer information on the industrial markets, try to liaison between Korean companies and local companies, try to offer real support, real assistance and consulting services to the companies. Other than these areas that I just mentioned, there are so many other opportunities with the northern regions, such as with the Arctic Circle and etc. But because we are living in a digital world, I want to focus on those digital economic areas. I think that this forum is very important, especially in light of the fact that we are going to be seeing the 30th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between Korea and Russia. Well, this year is going to be challenging because of COVID-19, but going forward, I hope that we can have experts from the northern region come here to Korea to give presentations and engage in discussions, and also we can have trade fairs set up for companies. So it can be a very big festival for culture and economy and the arts. And I would like to say that KOTRA will also cooperate fully and come up with different ideas and projects. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Park. He kept his 15-minute time allotment. Thank you very much for keeping that. We are going through a lot of uncertainty and change, and now this is the new global era, and the key issue is how to promote co-prosperity reconciliation. So it is about trade and cultural exchange that we need to promote to advance our interests. So his presentation was mainly focused on the CIS countries. Now I'm going to invite the panel members for their contribution. First of all, in the alphabetical order, I'm going to invite Director Kim Sang-woo. I would like to give you 5 to 6 minutes for your comments. Hello, everyone. I am Kim Sang-woo, Director of the Global Business Department at the Korea SMEs and Startups Agency. My agency, and especially the Global Business Department, deals with 17 countries and 27 locations in these countries in order to help startups and SMEs and smaller businesses to grow their business and help startups to scale up their business. When you look at this new northern area and also the new southern area, these are the key markets for Korean companies. But these markets have not been fully exploited by Korean companies, and that's the kind of feedback that we get from the field. This means that we can open up new opportunities as a new beginning, and I hope that this forum will be an opportunity for us to find ways to exploit and develop markets in the new northern and new southern regions. What I'm going to discuss in my comments is mainly about practical issues rather than discussing some theoretical aspects. In the keynote presentation, Director General Park Han-jin discussed some of the key changes that are taking place on the ground. As we're imagining the post-pandemic era and think about the economic policies as part of the new Northern policy, what can we do to help smaller companies advance into these markets? I'd like to discuss 3 points related to the kinds of strategies we need. First of all, we need to focus on high value-added manufacturing because this is the policy that is promoted by Russia. And I agree to what he said, especially when it comes to transfer of manufacturing capacity and technology and building joint manufacturing facilities. I believe that we need policies to expand such opportunities for smaller companies. The Russian government has been promoting high value-added manufacturing industries. So 2,200 items were selected for high value-added manufacturing industries, and there is a lot of support for these industries. We have many innovative technologies in Korea and production technologies that we can provide to Russia, and by using such technology, manufacturing can be done in Russia. So this is made in Russia by using Korean technology. This can be a good model. In 2018, there's a very interesting case that I want to mention. Now, there is this company that has a blood sugar level check diagnosis or glucose diagnosis company, and there is a company with the initial M in Russia. It is a Russian company. So the manufacturing technology of producing the glucose testing kit, there was a support for that. It was a turnkey project, and there was a lot of export that was created as a result. And afterwards, there were many follow-up collaborations for films and other supplementary items. So from the point of the smaller company, it was very beneficial because it was able to export its technology and continue to create value added. So this was a very successful model that we can replicate. In Russia, there are many industries that promote high value added, and we need to do a study of what kinds of needs there are, and then we can identify Korean companies that can match such demand, and then we can pursue collaboration. And secondly, when you think about the digital industries, the key would be, after the pandemic, would be basically e-commerce. E-commerce has been explosive during the pandemic as well. The e-commerce market is growing in this northern region, and smaller companies may not have capacity to do so, so they need support from the central government in expanding their presence in the e-commerce market in Russia. As you may know, Russia is the 7th largest consumption market, and their market size was $29 billion, but it is expected to grow to more than $50 billion. Now, this e-commerce market in Russia is not easy for Korean companies to enter into because they would only allow entrance of companies that have local warehousing facilities to come and go on to these e-commerce platforms. So these logistical requirements can be an entry barrier. In addition, we are utilizing the brand called Brand K to support export of Korean items produced by smaller companies. But then there is this competition issue of cheaper Chinese-produced items, and also there is this lack of brand recognition. So these are the kinds of struggles and challenges that we experience. And in order to support smaller companies, KOTRA and our support agency offices in Russia are trying to provide support so that there can be more positive recognition of the Korean brands in Russia. We are now trying to build a system where the vendor identification can take place more efficiently. And we have some retail and distribution companies that are specialized in e-commerce, and also some distribution companies run by ethnic Korean businessmen in Russia. So we want to collaborate with them so that we can have more of a local distribution chain for Korean consumer products. It's not just about offline distribution, but also about online distribution. In Russia, there is this locally based e-commerce platform, but one of the top 3 e-commerce players in Russia has built a platform for import. So among the local brands, some large brands can be utilized for direct cross-border transactions. And we are thinking of developing this kind of solution to allow cross-border transactions for Russian consumers. And third, smart city solutions or digital smart industries. These are new industries that are emerging. It was mentioned in the keynote presentation. In order to advance into the new and emerging markets, you need a good network. So we would like to help strengthening such network. And smart farm market and these new markets are very promising. And to enter into these promising markets, we can think about creating a consortium because individual companies may not be able to enter such new markets themselves. As for smart cities, the federal government sets standards, and then the local governments will have their own programs for smart city implementation. So St. Petersburg or Moscow, these are large cities with more than 1 million population, and they have satellite cities, 13 of them. And we need to build a network with these cities. For Korean companies to participate in smart city projects, we need to get access to information as quickly as possible, and that is where the government can provide support as well. And the final proposal that I want to make is that, of course, we need a short-term strategy, but at the same time, we need medium to long-term strategy. One of them would be to promote strategic cooperation between small companies of Korea and Russia. There are many excellent venture and startup companies, and in order for them to become more global, governments can create a support program to provide human resources, financial resources, and marketing support for these companies so that startup companies in Korea and Russia can grow their business to become more global companies. I don't have much time today, so I tried to share my ideas based on some keywords. We celebrated the 30th anniversary of the relations between Korea and Russia last year, and I hope that there will be more cooperation going forward. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kim. He shared with us his comments based on his field experience and how we can support smaller companies and what kinds of strategic assistance we need to provide. I wish I could give you more time for more comments. So thank you very much for your contribution. Next, I'd like to invite Chairman Kim Yoon-sik from Shindong Enercom.
Hello, my name is Kim Yoon-sik. About 8 months before the collapse of the Soviet Union, we ventured into Uzbekistan in Central Asia, and we have been in business for about 30 years in different sectors in the northern region. At the time, in the United States, people thought and believed that the Soviet Union would collapse soon. And so U.S. companies and U.S. travelers were asked to restrict travel to the Soviet Union. And then later, because they said that they anticipate a civil war due to nuclear weapons. But myself, because I was the CEO of a small SME in Korea, and because President Oh Tae-woo at the time provided funding that was about 3 billion Korean won, we thought it was good to make inroads into Russia. That was 1991. And I've been in business in Uzbekistan and Russia for about 30 years now. Mr. Park Han-jin talked about different points in his keynote presentation. And because we don't have much time, he just provided some general direction forward. I think that through this establishment of new logistical network, we can have shared growth going forward. And based on that, I would like to provide my insight based on my field experience and also the Russian perspective to try to provide a balanced perspective to you. Korea and Russia is going to commemorate its 30th anniversary of the diplomatic ties, but if we look at the northern economic cooperation policies of the past administrations, we have not seen remarkable progress in that field. The 9 Bridges policy has been announced in this current administration, and a financial platform about $20 trillion, $2 billion to invest in the Far East of Asia, but I have to say that the actual outcome is not that fruitful thus far. Recently, in the United States, under Biden administration, they are being very antagonistic towards China and Russia, and I'm going to talk about this later on, but Russia is very different from China, I want to say. The United States has led the sanctions regime against Russia, and a U.S. organization did research into the countries that and the companies that invested in Russia. For companies who have erected special purpose vehicles and special purpose companies in Russia. And in fact, when we tracked down the end owner of these SPCs, American owners were the number 1 owners. So it appears that the U.S. is putting sanctions on Russia, but they are investing most heavily in Russia, with the second being Japan. And it has been mentioned by KOTRA, Russia is a place where many different regional industrial corporations are investing heavily into Russia. And many of these industrial complexes include Japanese companies. I find that to be quite ironic because even in Korea, we talk about the importance of the new northern policy and the importance of cooperating with the northern countries. So we have to move away from ideology and try to apply this very specific strategy to really invest in these industrial complexes in Russia. Especially because you are hosting this forum, I am very much interested in what you're doing, and I asked to participate and present here. I know that geopolitically, Korea is located in a very specific situation, very specific location. So perhaps we can lead a shared growth going forward in land, sea, and air to try to come up with a very important and expansive logistics network, the first of which will be a rail network that connects South Korea and North Korea. In Northeast Asia, there's about 17.5 million TEUs that are traded out of Korea, and it crosses the Suez Canal and takes about 38 days to get to Europe. These maritime routes, of course, are always vulnerable to wars and attacks from pirates. And recently, with the Evergreen situation caught in the Suez Canal, you've seen that there are other of these logistics challenges that occur, and that entailed astronomical costs. So in this situation, if we can have a rail network across North Korea, get to Moscow, Vladivostok, it could take only about 10 days to get to the other side of Europe, which will bring about a logistical revolution. The Busan-Moscow rail would shorten that time by about 7 days, which is something that Russia really wants. But of course, this can only be possible if we have an inter-Korean rail. And Russia wants to try to completely overhaul its rail network and logistics network to allow this to even incorporate a blockchain technology into this so that all of the customs and passage will be streamlined across this rail. However, when we talk about this with the administration and with the politicians, they all say that the issue of the DPRK is a very big challenge. But I don't know if that is really the big challenge. Back in Kim Jong-il's time, there was cooperation between the parties, and Kim Jong-un has never opposed this either. Back while I was working in National Assembly, I looked at the passage, and if we were to have this interconnected rail, then we can give about 100 million US dollars to North Korea, which is much significantly cheaper than what would entail from different Mount Kumgang tourism projects, different projects. During the Park Geun-hye administration, we were the first to stop the Najin expressway cooperation. I don't know if we have really worked very hard to try to remove ourselves from have these sanctions lifted. I think that there is room for more consultation with the United States. I think that we can work together with CIS, the CSIS conference. And I asked the chairman of CSIS at the time of the forum, why are the US and Korea engaging in these sanctions that are not even included in the UN sanctions? Can we work together to try to lift these non-UN sanctions? I asked the chairman that question, but he didn't really respond. I remember President Trump hinting at the possibility of lifting these sanctions, but I don't think that there was any follow-up action to that. I think that at the time we could have lifted these sanctions, but under this new Biden administration, I don't think that they're going to lift the sanctions because I believe they're being more hawkish. During the current sanctions regime, I think that we can disallow DPRK from unloading and loading carriage into the logistics network, and we can maybe write off the 10 billion debt, and at the time when the logistics networks are connected, then the debt would be written off automatically. The case of the inter-Korean rail connection, Russian planes can cross the skies right away and head to Vladivostok. That will be very streamlined in that regard. And as Mr. Park said in his presentation, right now, Russia is working very hard, very actively in trying to open the route to the Arctic. China is also doing the same. They have brought in 2 of these ice-breaking ships in Shindong. And Japan has also brought about a gas transmission line from Novostek. And it has brought in LNG carriers with automatic ice shaving capacity after they've taken in about 60% of the equity investment. Korea is not able to receive any LNG through these arrangements because when Korea was asked to put up equity investment of about just 10%, Korea still did not accept that offer. The private sector really begged the government to try to invest in this, but the government did not. We have to move away from coal and gas and coal and oil and go to LNG, but we missed that boat. After the 2019 Maersk first Virgin flight in the Arctic Circle, they were able to cut down the whole passage time by about 13 days. So if we can start from Busan Port, go by China to Japan, then this area, this Northeast Asian area, would really be a logistics hub where air, sea, and land travel can all be interconnected. And we don't have to see the same kind of challenge or the accident that we saw in the Suez Canal recently. We have to come up with a national vision and participate in this together. When Putin came, in the St. Petersburg and Primorsky Krai lane, if that can all be traveled by shuttle, then Korea can become a logistics hub. Russia and Korea can share this infrastructure and engage in a win-win situation and have shared growth. And with the Korea-Russia or the EAEU and Uzbekistan, the FTA arrangement that we are trying to sign should be done soon, because right now with the US-China trade wars, and that is branching out to Quad, I think that it's important for us to expand our economic territory. Given our industrial structure, these northern countries can cooperate with us for win-win, and our GDP size is very similar. I don't think we have to underestimate these countries given the current GDP volume. And we often talk about Korea has IT and Russia has resources, and as Mr. Park said in his keynote presentation, right now what Korea really wants is robotics and automatic autonomous driving. This technology is really something that is found in Russia, not the US. We have to receive this kind of funding, but because Korea is refusing to do so, it's just very difficult, and they have to spin off their companies. With these new logistics network, I think that Korea can really receive a lot of economic benefits. And with grain, oil, energy, raw materials, and even hydrogen, we can acquire these resources and contribute to our overall security and energy cooperation. Lastly, I just want to say one thing, which is that in this current tension between the two Koreas, I think that we can realize a unification vision. In 2005, when President Roh Moo-hyun visited Russia, a state visit, Putin invited him to the Russian dacha and said that I support a unification that is led by the Republic of Korea. And the delegation also gave a presentation saying that this is a huge diplomatic breakthrough. But from 2008 and on, we have not heard something similar from President Putin. After 30 years of all of these different policies, we have yet to see a visible achievement. So I think that many people are very upset about the lack of this rail connectivity. So I just want to urge all of you here, because you are here to discuss national strategies. Hopefully that this could be a way for us to bring more vision and dreams to our later descendants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman Kim, for your comments. The topic that you discussed is a very important topic. For the past 30 years, you have had experience in doing business in this country. So thank you for sharing your experience. Now, let's move on to Mr. Park Joung Ho from the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy. Please go ahead. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this forum. I'd like to make 3 points. First of all, what is the significance of the northern policy? Second, what is the new approach that we need to take? And third, what are the policy considerations that we need to make? As you may know, why is the northern region important? 30 years ago, the northern policy had resulted in very good result. At that time, there were ideological conflicts, but thanks to the northern policy, Korean companies were able to enter into the northern markets, and we were able to secure energy supply, and we were also able to brand and market Korean products in the northern markets. So in that sense, the northern policy was very significant and useful. Now, why do we need to revitalize the new northern policy? It is because the economic landscape is changing, there's growing protectionism, and there's strategic tension between the US and China, and the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, as well as the pandemic. Because of these factors, we have so much uncertainty in the global economy. Therefore, in order to identify and develop new growth engines and to expand our business territory to go beyond the tension between the US and China, we need to utilize the northern region. Therefore, it is very important to have effective strategy towards this region. So this forum is very meaningful. I believe that the future of Korea lies in the northern region. We need to manage the inter-Korean relations well so that we can have more connection with the Eurasian continent. And by having this connectivity, we can develop new economic drivers for the Korean economy. Secondly, when we are pursuing the new northern policy, we used to focus on infrastructure, but as was mentioned by the keynote presentation, we need to change our mindset and we need to try a different approach. First of all, why do we need a new approach? Last year was very special for the Korean-Russian relations, and next year we will celebrate the 30th anniversary with many CIS countries, and it is time to shape our strategy towards the northern region so that we can continue to have sustainable cooperation with the northern region. So the priority here is to find ways to improve the quality of life of people in Central Asia. This is mainly about healthcare, welfare, environment, and the social infrastructure. Secondly, the northern region may have lower income, average income, but they are not a target for donation or assistance. But we need to recognize the potential of the northern region in a more forward-looking manner. We need to pursue economic cooperation that befits the global trend, so that we can produce tangible results from this type of cooperation. And I believe that this is going to be a very important starting point. Green New Deal, digital economy, hydrogen, and advanced IT technology. These are the kinds of promising areas where we can build infrastructure together with these partner countries. And this will be a way to design our future together. And thirdly, regarding the inter-Korean relations, the new northern policy can be a big driver of change, and we can utilize this. And in this way, we can pursue minilateral cooperation on the Korean Peninsula. We need to identify potential cooperation areas, including the Arctic area development. So we need to change our mindset in approaching the northern region. And finally, I'd like to make two policy considerations that we need to keep in mind. There are some assumptions that we need to make. First of all, in this pandemic era, there are many industrial transformations and changes taking place. The key challenge for the northern region is digitalization. Now they are still in the process of changing their paradigm, and once again, they need to embrace digital transformation, low carbon economy, carbon emissions reduction, climate change, and so on. So there are many challenges that these countries need to address. Then how can we collaborate with these countries to build a better future? So this is the kind of mindset that we have to have. And there are two key policy suggestions that I want to make. The first suggestion is the following. This is about Russia. Between Korea and Russia, there are innovative technology and future economic growth infrastructure such as future mobility, healthcare, fintech, IT, and e-commerce, and so on. But we cannot start from scratch. Recently, between China and the US, there is technology hegemony war, and now Russia and Korea can collaborate in order to find common ground for bilateral cooperation, and we need to come up with our response strategy. When President Putin visits Korea, they may make some digital partnership declaration for Korea and Russia so that these two countries can work together for digital development. And the second policy suggestion is about other northern states. In this post-pandemic era, there will be many development needs. In this regard, China, Turkey, Russia, and other countries, they may compete fiercely to gain the hegemony. So the Green New Deal and the digital transformation strategy can be utilized so that Korea can gain some upper hand, and the EDCF funding can be utilized as well to provide assistance and development assistance for the northern states. And in doing so, we can have more presence and make more contribution. And when the northern policy becomes successful in this era of tension between the US and China, we will be able to create some room for our own independent diplomatic efforts. And this is the goal that we need to include in promoting the northern policy. Thank you. Thank you very much for your comment. I can see that you prepared a lot for this panel discussion, so you were able to keep your comments very brief and to the point. And he discussed the macro and micro aspects of the new northern policy and what we need to do going forward. Now, let's shift our gear a little bit to discuss diplomacy. I'm going to invite Ambassador Park Joon-yong from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Please go ahead.
So you've said that I'm here to provide a diplomatic perspective, but I have to say that I'm here on a personal capacity. But it just so happens that I have received some opinions from MOFA in the relevant department, so I would like to pass that on as well and give my opinions on Mr. Park's keynote. I think we talked about very general ideas and also some ideas straight from the field. So I want to talk about 3 points in particular. The new northern policy and the new southern policy have several differences between them, not just in terms of the economy, but in different areas. Largely, they do share the similarity that they want to engage in cooperation across many fields. With the new northern policy, I think right now the government is leading the cooperation, and this is the correct choice when we consider the characteristics of the Eurasian countries. So the 3 points that I want to talk about today, from 1990 on, we have tried to promote cooperation and exchange with Eurasia, and this is now taking up a very important part of our external policies, especially under this current administration. They've been working very hard in that regard, and I do believe that in the next administration, this is going to be followed up as well. So this is not going to be a one-off policy. We all are mindful of the fact that this is going to be continued on, and this is something that our partners should also be mindful of. The second point that I want to say is that inter-Korean relations improvement would be a catalyst in trying to further cooperation with the northern regions, and this has been mentioned by many of you. But as you know, there are different limitations in that regard. Of course, we have to try to work towards that end goal, but the current new northern policy, even without any exchange or cooperation with DPRK, we can still promote the new northern policy continuously with the northern region countries. And this is the message that we have to send to the northern countries. So we shouldn't let them think that we are seeing them as a means to an end to try to improve relations with the DPRK, that is not our end goal, that our end goal is to really expand cooperation with the northern region. And ultimately, there needs to be private sector cooperation in different fields. But right now, it's primarily a G2G level of cooperation. But we want to bring about as much participation from the private sector as possible and try to do that as soon as possible. The second point that I want to say is that from the perspective of the Korean government, the new northern policy some people are critical that this policy has not had many outcomes, but I think given the current conditions, we did have some achievements. So for example, we've had summits, so various government level dialogues and conversations, and people-to-people interest and corporate interest has also risen. And we've also seen the start of several projects. They are successfully underway. For cooperation and exchange in many of these areas to be really promoted further, we have to break down the psychological barrier and try to get closer to one another. And I think that the policy has allowed for some of that to happen. So I think that is a good outcome of the policy. Because of COVID-19, we've reached out to our partners primarily online. The geographical distance has been a big obstacle, but going forward, even without COVID-19 pandemic, we can still have a lot of these online conferences together with offline conferences. We can continue to make use of this format. And another thing that I want to say is that our government has been making use of the channel of ODA to try to bring about more cooperation and participation from the companies, because I think that this is a good way, an indicator for the Korean government to show how committed we are to the new northern policy. There are 27 countries of 89 countries that are key destinations for ODA. In the past, there was only one Eurasian country there, but this year that expanded to 4. And for your reference, the ODA amount is quite significant this year. It's for 3.5 billion Korean won as a whole, and by 2030, it's going to be increased to about 6 billion. So this ODA amount is quite significant, and we're going to be leveraging it in the for the new northern policy. And our key points in the ODA could be transportation, education, healthcare. So we believe that this can do a good outreach to the partner countries. With Tajikistan, we did not have a full working embassy there, but starting this year, we have upgraded the existing diplomatic mission there into a full embassy. The last point that I want to make is that when it comes to cooperation, both sides have to cooperate and come up with many success cases and try to minimize the cases of failure. And in that regard, I think that our partner countries should really listen closely to the complaints and the concerns of our companies. It's important for us to really listen to the companies in the field. There are many areas with a lot of potential, but our companies, our corporations should have economic feasibility and be very accountable and responsible in our government administration services. So that is something that we have to work together with the Eurasian partners on. For the companies, they have to take a very long-term outlook in their investment. I agree with that assessment. The population in Eurasia is very young. They have a very good regard of Korea, and they have rich resources. So we have to identify those areas with high potential. And I do think that there will be many investment destinations. But some people have this idea, when they hear that I invested in this country, in this market, and it failed, then that could have negative repercussions to other potential investors. And potential investors might think that the entire Eurasian market is very dangerous to invest in. So I would like to urge our companies, the Korean companies, to be very mindful and prudent of that when they venture into the Eurasian market. It's true that there is some investment risk there. So we have to be very prudent in managing the investment risk. So the embassies, KOTRA, and the relevant organizations should provide support to the companies. That is all.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Park. He touched upon public policy as well, public diplomacy, as well as the longer-term perspective on our relations with the northern region. Now I'd like to invite lawyer Park Hyo Min for her comments. Hello everyone, I am Park Hyo Min from Yulchon. So far, we discussed how to promote cooperation with Russia, and there was a lot of blueprint suggested. But as a lawyer, from my perspective, I'd like to discuss how we can minimize risks while entering into these Eurasian markets. So my comments may not be that interesting, and they may contain some practical discussions. In promoting cooperation with Russia, of course, Russia is a country that we need to continue to work with. However, at the same time, we also have to be mindful of the U.S. because that is the destiny that Korea is situated in. And recently, when you look at the situations in the U.S., EU, even though EU is a key ally of the U.S., the U.S. has been warning the EU of imposing sanctions on EU if they continue to engage with Russia. Likewise, when we think about all these financial sanctions that can be imposed by the U.S., we have to be really careful about that. But also there are some positive sides as well. As was mentioned previously, when you think about sanctions imposed upon Russia, they are different from the sanctions imposed on Iran or North Korea. Now, the U.S. has put in place very strong sanctions on North Korea and Iran. But as for Russia, there has been so much investment made by Americans in Russia, so they were not able to put in place comprehensive sanctions. So you may find that some sanctions are very specific. So there are very detailed sanctions imposed on certain aspects. But when it comes to the financial sanctions, even though they are very detailed, from the perspective of the banks, even though there are certain possibilities for engagement, the banks do not really want to deal with Russia as a whole because of this is the effect of sanctions. But when you examine the situation in Russia, there are a lot of things you can do with Russia that will not violate the sanctions. And at the same time, the changes that are happening in the financial market mean that there are positive potentials. So there is financial sanctions imposed by the US on Russia, but it is because the global financial market is connected to the US. When Korean companies collaborate with Russian companies, when there are transactions made and dollars used, then financial institutions in the U.S. can monitor such transactions and they may subject to sanctions. Given the situation, Russia has been trying to go around the U.S. sanctions by utilizing digital currency. Now, the Russian government has been working to create some legal framework. And there were some legal discussions at the lower house of the parliament to issue digital currency of the ruble. And also they tried to come up with a digital currency infrastructure so that the distributed ledger system can be introduced, which cannot be monitored centrally by the US authorities. Then they would have to make individual requests for monitoring of such transactions. This may become quite tricky. And this means that there will be some detour routes for Korean companies to transact with Russian companies. But there's a lot of uncertainties regarding digital currency. Russia and China are very active in developing their digital currency, but in the US and the UK, they are relatively more cautious, and they think that the existing systems are sufficient, and there are so many risks involving digital currency, so they are not happy or they are not active in developing the digital currency. So whether you go through the government or private company, you need to understand the specific sanctions, and at the same time, you need to understand the overall trend involving digital currency. And Korea is situated between Russia and the US, and there is a change in the paradigm, so we need to keep that in mind. And secondly, since 2017, Russia has been promoting digital transformation announced by President Putin. So there's a high level of digitalization in Russia, and that's the same for Korea. So what's important here is that there is an FTA in the service area between Russia and Korea. If this negotiation is done successfully, then the two countries can negotiate on digital norms. Such negotiations were made between Japan and the US, and Korea is now engaged in negotiations with many countries regarding digital standards. Likewise, we can promote digital trade and digital standardization between Korea and Russia. This will facilitate more trade between the two countries. Thank you. Thank you very much. Of course, we need to promote cooperation, but we also have to do risk assessment to understand what risks are involved. So such comments were from the lawyer's perspective, very acute and very necessary. Next, I'd like to invite Professor Lee Sang-jun from Kookmin University.
I would like to begin by thanking you for inviting me to this very meaningful forum. Because the other speakers have already given many useful and good, productive proposals before me, I'm going to talk about something that is a little bit different from what I have prepared. I want to speak from the perspective of Eurasian countries, from the northern countries, in the feasibility of working with Korea. Because we don't have any Central Asian scholars and academics here present today, I want to base my remarks on their understanding of Korea and how they see Korea as a valuable partner. In the case of Russia, they're seeing huge transformation in their national strategies. The TSR and the Arctic Seaway is already kind of like a Belt and Road initiative because it is a very big road and a very big sea route that are being connected. So this is Russia's own BRI. And for this completion of Russia's BRI, they need the participation of Asian Pacific countries because they want to bypass China, past the continent, and go towards the oceans. And in that regard, the key partner is Korea. And they see Korea as a very strategic partner. And we can see this visibly. There's a Russian nuclear energy company has recently bought an equity stake in Enotech to try to foster its EV battery production. And right now they are building facilities. They're going to build a factory in Russia that is capable of producing 2 gigawatt-hour by 2030. This means they are expecting their EV fleet to increase by about 30-fold in just 5 years. That's how important Korea is to them. And also the Russian vaccine, the Sputnik vaccine, has been working together with the Korean Green Cross and Binax, Korean Cross. These different companies are being asked by Russia to commissioning them for the production of these vaccines because they see that Korea's biomedicine production capability is quite high. For Central Asian countries, Korea's value is very important. You might have read Kicking the Ladder by Professor Joung Ho. Many countries have already achieved a level of advanced economy, and they've kicked the ladder. But in the case of Korea, there's still a very rich development experience that is alive here. So this is not fossilized. This experience, which is fossilized in advanced countries, is still alive and well here in Korea. And even in our DNA, we still have that experience of going through development. So for Central Asian countries, this potential of development cooperation and this power of development cooperation, they understand that this is a very big value. Oh. It's almost as if they understand that Korea is broadening its horizons for development cooperation and development assistance with Central Asia. I think it's also very important for countries to become smarter. We have smartphones and smart cars. In Korea recently, we've gone past Italy's GDP, and we are also on the cusp of overthrowing Japan in terms of dynamics. I think that Korea can become a very smart country. And in that regard, it's important for us to know that we are going ahead, going further, but we want to lend a hand to our other partners so that we can assist those other countries to also grow as advanced countries and also become global citizens. I think it's important for us to go step in step because I know that today's theme is walking together. So in that regard, I think for Central Asian countries, Korea's value proposition is quite significant. And I do have several proposals that I want to make. I would like to talk about two in particular. Because we are here at a forum organized by Digital Times, I think that is very relevant because the digital era and the northern region are a great fit right now. I think that the new northern policy has been started by the Moon administration, but there's been a lot of effort in the past leading up to this, and there were some areas that did not see a lot of improvement, which is digital cooperation. However, this COVID-19 pandemic really forced countries to move towards digitization because we've finally seen that the digital transformation is destiny, that we cannot move away from this. And I think that this is very relevant because we are at a forum hosted by Digital Times, and digitization is something that we really need right now between Korea and northern countries. So this is very meaningful for us to be discussing that here. And digital cooperation, as the attorney said, in the fourth term under Putin, the word digitization or digital economy has been uttered by Putin the most number of times. When we talk about Russia, we see that as a country where we have high level of energy dependence, but for the past few years, Russia's Gazprom and Sberbank, all these state-owned enterprises, has been really making use of digital banking, digital finance services. And in fact, digital finance has seen an accelerated increase of about 8% year on year. And so this has even seen explosive growth because of COVID-19 pandemic. Many Korean companies have been working on that. Samsung has created an AI center in Moscow. Hyundai Mobis has been working with Yandex, a search portal in Russia, and they've test-driven an autonomous vehicle. And Korea's KT, Korea Telecom, has been working with the Rail Corporation in Russia on a virtual rail network system. And as just been mentioned before, numerous companies are working in the digital space with Russian companies. And I think that this is a very desirable and encouraging development. Last year, another surprising transformation that we've seen is in the area of climate change. Last year, we all actually achieved our climate targets. Actually, it was brought by the COVID-19 pandemic. In the past, when we talk about our carbon emissions target, people thought that it cannot be reached, but now it can actually be reached. Of course, we still have other challenges ahead of us, but with climate change and trying to decrease carbon emissions, this is another transformation that we cannot avoid. So we have to engage in cooperation in this regard. EV batteries and also hydrogen energy. In Sakhalin, there's a clean energy, hydrogen energy, blue energy complex that Russia wants to build. In the US-China trade war and a post-COVID-19 era, many countries and all citizens are seeing the need to move away from independence and climate crisis. I think that for us, it's very important to think about security, not just about military security, but about economic security, human security, health security, and environment security, food security, and energy security. So in this era, we have to think about ways to expand our security cooperation in many different fields and also create a new sort of a culture and a new sort of civilization. When all this is over, I think we're going to all go on these revenge trips, and this explosive suppressed energy for ties and cooperation will finally come into full force. This Korea-Russia Services FTA, for example, that is being negotiated, and the FTA with EAEU, as has been mentioned by many people, I think that we can move away from being such an isolated island. And in the global post-COVID-19 era, we can open up our doors and become members that work together in the global community. I would like to ask you for your interest and participation. And because HK+ National Strategies Research Project Agency has selected this as the first theme, I believe that this is where you're showing your commitment. So I would like to show my appreciation in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sang-Jun Lee. About 2 years ago, there was the Northeast Asia Supergrid project, and it was about connecting the energy grid of the Northeast Asian countries together. And he was involved in discussing this topic, and he was also the head of the academic society on Slavic culture and studies. I believe that we're slightly behind schedule, but I'd like to next invite Mr. Lee, attorney from Yulchon. He's also chairman of the Korea-Russian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He has a lot of experience in this regard. Please go ahead. Good afternoon. I am Hwa-jun Lee from Yulchon. I don't have much time, so I'd like to discuss the relations between Korean and Russian companies and Korean companies and companies in Central Asia, what kinds of investments and business cooperation are taking place on the ground, and that's going to be the topic of my comments. In my case, about 30 years ago, when I was in elementary school, I visited Russia together. I actually lived in Russia with my parents, and I went all the way to university in Russia, and then I served in the military, and then I've been serving my clients in Russia at Yulchon. As much as we don't know much about Russia, they don't have much knowledge about Korea. But nevertheless, there have been a lot of cooperative efforts between the two countries, which is quite encouraging. Now we're discussing digital economy. And Mr. Park Han-jin from KOTRA mentioned about potential cooperation on digital transformation. Russia wants to cooperate with Asian countries like Korea for digital transformation. It may not be well known in Korea, but there is a major IT company called Yandex and Mail.ru. Mail.ru has one of the BOD members, a former Naver CEO. So Kim Sang-won was invited as a member of the board for this company. This means that this Russian company wants to learn from Korea regarding digital business. And as was mentioned by another panel member, Yandex is another major IT company. It is equivalent to Naver in Korea. And together with Hyundai Mobis, they are collaborating for future mobility, and about 400 billion won would be invested this is a very big project, and we are providing legal counsel. 10 years ago, I began to cover the Russia and Central Asia at Yulchon. About 14 years ago, the main cooperation was done in the traditional industries, but now many IT companies are doing business with those in Russia. And also, there are many smaller companies who are doing and entering into the Russian market. Especially the smart farm market is very promising. In Moscow, there is this organic grocery supermarket. It is similar to Whole Foods in the US. And this organic produce or supermarket is very popular. And here, the smart farm solutions are provided by a Korean company. So when you think about the agricultural sector in Siberia, there is Hyundai Heavy Industry that is doing business, and Lotte Trade. They have agricultural farm on a large scale, but for smart farm solutions, a Korean company was able to provide such solution in Moscow so that they can supply organic, fresh produce to the supermarket chain. And as was mentioned by Kim, when it comes to e-commerce, one of the organizers of this event is the Digital Times, and I hope that the Digital Times will promote what's happening in e-commerce. Recently, Coupang was listed on the US, so the market cap was very big. In Russia, the largest e-commerce company is called Wildberries, and the founder and owner and CEO of Wildberries is actually of Korean descendant, is a female, and she appears quite frequently on the Russian media. It's because she is actually the richest person in Russia. Yuri Ruskovov, Yelena, who was the wife of mayor in Moscow. She used to be number one, but the CEO of Wildberries is the richest woman in Russia. The asset size or the net worth would be about 15 trillion won. When Korean companies are struggling with respect to e-commerce, you may see the case of GS Home Shopping entering the Russian market, but the home shopping business model is different from those in Russia. So Wildberries is a very promising company, and the owner is very young, born in 1975, and she used to be an English tutor, and then she began her online shopping mall and was able to grow her business very successfully. So this can be a good opportunity for Korean companies for collaboration. And Enertech case was what we dealt with. Some of the older panel members may remember that cassette tape manufacturer Sehan Media used to have this company, and then it was taken over by a Russian company, and Rosatom is a subsidiary of was sold to a subsidiary of the nuclear energy company in Russia. So this shows that there are a lot of Russian companies who are interested in Korean businesses, and traditionally, of the companies that we provide legal counsel, I was able to realize that Korean companies are moving very, very quickly. Now there are FTA negotiations between Korea and Russia, but there is a FTA between Russia and Vietnam, and there are many auto parts manufacturers operating in Vietnam. As they increase their market share in Russia, they are able to sell automobile parts that are produced in Vietnam, and such trade is subject to the FTA between Russia and Vietnam, so they can benefit from no tariff or tariff exemption and many other benefits. So Korean companies were able to gain price competitiveness by utilizing the Russia-Vietnam FTA, and this really means that Korean companies are very agile and they're active in advancing into the Russian market. So as you can see here, in many different areas, a lot is happening. And also for pandemic, RDRF, which was organized by the Soviet Wealth Fund, and there was some project to produce this medical material in Korea. So it's not just about Korean companies selling their products in the Russian market, which is rather a traditional approach. But there are many other approaches that are being tried to increase cooperation between the two countries. And Pundang Seoul SNU Hospital has this plan to establish a general hospital in Moscow, in Russia. That's an example in the healthcare sector. On the ground, I feel that there needs to be more cooperation, but in reality, I can see that there is an increasing number of cases of Korean companies doing business in Russia and Central Asia. And I hope that such will gain more momentum so that there will be more business exchanges between the two countries and between the two regions. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. We were able to learn from Mr. Lee's experience as he's been working with various companies. Now, I'd like to invite the last panel member because it is the alphabetical order. He is coming as the last panel member, but I believe that Director Chun will be someone who can sum up our discussion of the panel session. He is Director for North Trade and Coordination Division at the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy. Please go ahead.
I would like to extend my congratulations to you on the launch of the Culture and Strategies Forum for the Korean Peninsula and the North. As I am involved in this area, I want to thank you. When I met with the Deputy Minister Victor Choi-fen in Russia in 2019, I gave him a present of a BTS DVD, which was really popular at the time, and that really allowed for the summit to go very well. Last year, when there was a summit, we talked about the Korean show Kingdom, so we also gave him the present of a Korean hanbok and a hat. And in October, there was a short video uploaded to YouTube, and this also talks about of Mingyonghwa, and this YouTube video saw a lot of hits and views, more so than any other, because I do believe that culture and arts really is a good foundation, even in the for politics and for the economy. So we want to see more growth in that field. I would like to thank our keynote presenter and the panelists and also the moderator who have given great proposals, and will try to think about ways to reflect these in our policies. The Deputy Prime Minister focuses on these local domestic policies, but when the president goes on state visits, the MOTI minister typically follows the president. It goes with the president and not the deputy prime minister. And the minister of MOTI gives his advice on economic policies. If we look at the statistics over the past 10 years, we see trade volume increase consistently. In 2017, it was 23 billion. And in 2020, because of oil price going down and COVID-19, it fell down to 24 billion once again. Despite the trade volume, we've seen a lot of volatility in the trade volume with northern region in particular. In 2015, for example, overall trade decreased 12.5%, but the decrease was more significant with northern region by about 38%, and in 2018, there was an increase of 8.4% globally, but there was also 31% increase with the northern region. Last year, when we've seen a decrease, it was decreased by 6.5% with the world, but more than 20% with the northern region. So there's a high level of volatility here because the northern region has a lot of risk and more uncertainty given compared to other markets. So for the companies that are doing business here, we always think about ways to cover these different investment risks. When we look at plant investment, plant bids that have been awarded from the last 10 years is about 3.7 billion. And globally, the northern region takes up about 2.1% to about 2.3%, 2.5% or so, but 4.5% in just plant investment. And in shipbuilding, the contracts awarded from 2017 to 2020, we've won bids of about 8 billion. That's about what represents twice of shipbuilding contracts. And the northern region accounts for about 4.5% of global shipbuilding volume. And even with the people-to-people exchange, it was around 4%, but in 2020, the decrease amount was not that significant. It was 5.4% for the northern region. So we've seen more plant investment in shipbuilding and people-to-people exchange compared to the overall trade, which means that we can see a rise in overall trade going forward. And when we look at these statistics, we can see that many of these northern region countries are focused on particular sectors, and it's important for us to look at areas where we could have an advantage in. So, for example, with the shipbuilding, we've talked about the sea ice-breaking vessels. China's ice-breaking vessel was once stranded, and so now many of these clients are coming to Korean shipbuilders. So that could be an area where we can continue to leverage our advantages and our strengths. You've also mentioned the commemoration of the 30th anniversary. In 2020 was Mongolia, and the other Central Asian countries will be next year. So next year, this year, last year, they were all very important. And in January, we'll have the 30th anniversary with Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. In 2019, with Russia, we've given a lot of hydrogen energy proposals to Russia. In 2019, Russia did not really respond, but beginning early last year, Russian counterparts have been coming to us to try to propose hydrogen energy cooperation. Maybe it might be because Russia has more funding in Moscow particularly. They're trying to invest in hydrogen energy vehicles, and beginning end of last year, they've said that they want to engage in cooperation in Sakhalin Energy Cluster. Hydrogen energy requires a lot of infrastructure, and Russia wants hydrogen EVs, hydrogen vehicles in Moscow, and also sell this energy from Salin to Korea. However, this Salin project we don't only have a plan right now, so we'll have to formulate a long-term vision. This year, we can see some more momentum in cooperation in the mobility sector with Russia. Someone mentioned autonomous vehicles. When we look at mobility, this encompasses engine, so fuel, and different other areas for cooperation. And when we look at drones, in Korea, I've heard that you cannot fly drones in the cold winter months because the batteries, their efficiency goes down, so that's where you need hydrogen energy. So you see these drones, autonomous vehicles, and also with the ships and vessels, we can engage in different mobility initiatives with Russia. And we are collaborating with Russia. In the second half of this year, we're going to have ministerial level conferences to try to advance these different programs. For Central Asia, last year, after we announced the Korean New Deal, in January of this year, we've also announced the globalization of the Digital New Deal. The Digital New Deal is being spearheaded by the Ministry of Science. For the Green New Deal, it's MOTI and the Ministry of Environment that are working together on this. With Central Asia, we're going to expand Digital and Green New Deal projects. Already with Uzbekistan in January, when there was a digital summit, we signed an MOU in digital cooperation. And in 2019, in April, when the VIP visited Uzbekistan, we had a test run of a mobility project, and we're going to start focusing on this as well. Many people mentioned smart farms. In Central Asia, there's a lot of demand for smart farming. But these are countries where there is water scarcity. In 2019, we went to Uzbekistan. I remember hearing that they've banned paddy farming because of water scarcity. So we have to think of ways where we can do smart farms in an environmentally conscious way. Another is the aspect of the Caspian Sea. In Eurasia and in Central Asia, and even with the Middle East, the Caspian Sea is right there in the crossroads. So we are trying to identify different cooperative projects centering on the Caspian Sea, one of which has to do with shipbuilding. Turkmenistan has a plan, a national strategy on water purification. And so this is an area where we are focusing on talks in, and with the environmental pollution that comes out of oil field exploration, we are trying to also think about ways to engage in those projects centering on the Caspian Sea. Many people also mentioned FTAs. With Russia, we are right now in negotiations, services FTA. Unfortunately, last year, because of COVID-19, we had a lot of online meetings, but because these are online meetings, it's just difficult for us to have sidebar conversations, so we're not seeing a lot of progress. With Uzbekistan, we've had negotiations in January, and with Mongolia, and recently with Georgia, we've started negotiations. My last point is that in the COVID-19 situation, last August, we've tried to set up a center to assist businessmen travel. So last year, we've tried to provide information on PCR testing, and beginning in April, we've also tried to facilitate vaccinations for businessmen and self-quarantining and etc. VIP received his vaccine on the 23rd. I think Putin received a shot on a similar date. So I think that maybe we can see summit-level meetings more this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a long time. We touched upon political, economic, and other aspects, but the underlying philosophy is about the newness and the potential. And by throwing these keywords, we were able to discuss how we can promote cooperation from many different perspectives. Kissinger said that the fortified city is the essence of the post-pandemic era. We need to improve the quality and the substance of our cooperation, and I believe that that was the gist of the message that he shared with us. All of these comments were very informative and significant. So I really appreciate all the panel members for their remarks. We are running behind schedule because there was so much passion, and we are running behind schedule by 15 minutes. And finally, I'd like to once again express my gratitude to Mr. Park Han-jin for his keynote presentation. I would also like to express my gratitude to all the panel members. With this, I would like to conclude Roundtable 2 on trade. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Today, we have this Culture and Strategy Forum for the Korean Peninsula and the North. I am the MC for the opening ceremony as well as the closing ceremony. Once again, I'd like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to all the participants for their dedication. The second Culture and Strategies Forum for the Korean Peninsula and the North is what we all look forward to. Now I'm going to invite a special performance for a celebration by Ensemble Soo. The Ensemble Soo is trying to address local problems by utilizing art and culture, and they provide support for many charity organizations in support of children in need. There are 3 pieces of music they will perform, and I'm sure you received an email. There was a short promotional video that's about 2 minutes, and then there will be Hyun Ye-rim, a soprano vocalist. She will sing 2 songs in a row together with Ensemble So. So please welcome the performance with a big round of applause.
Des yeux qui font baiser les miens, un riz qui perce sous sa bouche. Voilà les portraits sans retouche, j'ai le maquillage, j'appartiens. Quand il me prend de ses bras, il me parle tout bas, je vois la vie en rose. Il me dit des mots d'amour, des mots de tous les jours, et que ça me fait quelque chose. Il me rentre de mon cœur une parle de bonheur dont je connais la cause. C'est lui pour moi, moi pour lui dans la vie. Il me l'a dit, l'a juré pour la vie. Il me dit d'être perçoit, alors je sens en moi mon cœur qui bat. Des yeux qui font baiser les miens, un riz qui perce sous sa bouche. Voilà les portraits sans retouche, j'ai le maquillage, j'appartiens. Hold me close and hold me fast, the magic spell you cast. This is la vie en rose. When you kiss me, heaven sigh, and though I close my eyes, I see la vie en rose. When you press me to your heart, I'm in a world apart, the world where roses bloom. And when you speak, angels sing from above. Every day, words seems to turn into love songs. Give your heart and soul to me, and life will always be la vie en rose. La 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 la, la 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 la, la vie en rose. 다음 곡은 아름다운 나라 들려드리겠습니다. 저 산자락에
How did you enjoy the special performance? The title of the song is This Beautiful Tradition and a Beautiful Country. We were all able to appreciate the beauty and the beauty of the traditional music and the beauty of our country. Now, I would like to invite Professor Joon-yong, who is the head of the HK+ National Strategies Research Project Agency, for his closing remarks. We started this forum early in the morning at 9:30. I would say that the opening ceremony began at 10 a.m. We had the opening ceremony in the morning and we had 2 roundtable sessions in the afternoon. The title of the forum is the Culture and Strategies Forum for the Korean Peninsula and the North. I am not sure what kind of result we were able to produce from this forum, but this is the first step. It is the first forum of its kind. It was our attempt to define the northern region and what we need to do to promote better relations with this region. In the 2 roundtable sessions in the afternoon, we discussed that we need to be based on the principle of reciprocity and joint development. We will take into account all the suggestions and comments that were provided this year so that we can advance and develop the quality of this forum going forward. There are many researchers within the research project agency that are conducting research on the northern region so that we can build a better foundation for unification. And our cultural research is related to diplomacy and trade and other areas. And we made that first step towards that direction. I would like to express my gratitude to many participants. In the morning session, we had Chairman Kim Sung-hwan, who was the former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and President Son Hyuk-sang of KOICA for their wonderful keynote speeches. And in the afternoon, we had 2 separate sessions. And there were very informative and inspiring keynote presentations. The first of them was provided by Executive Vice President Kim Sung-in of the Korea Foundation. And the second keynote presentation was by Director General Park Han-jin of KOTRA, Global Academy. And in the morning session, we had many ambassadors and representatives of the diplomatic mission from Russia as well as many northern countries. This was our first step. And there will be many steps in the future. I would like to express my gratitude to CEO Park Ha-kyung of the Digital Times, and many special reporters were covering this program. Thank you very much for your work. I would also like to thank professors who are part of this research project agency. Thank you very much for your hard work. We will do our best to improve the quality of the forum in the future. This is my promise to you, and we will work hard. And with that, I would like to declare that the first Culture and Strategies Forum for the Korean Peninsula and the North has been concluded successfully. Thank you very much, Professor Joon-yong, for your final remarks. I would now like to invite all the remaining participants to come up to the front for a commemorative photo. So please come up to